There's a popular idea floating around online that if you spend just 100 hours on something, you'll already be better than 95% of people. Then there's the much bigger claim that if you put in 10,000 hours, you become a true master. Both ideas are catchy, both sound motivating, but the real question is not whether those numbers sound impressive. The real question is this: how much time does it actually take to become genuinely good at something? And what really separates a professional from everyone else? A lot of people repeat the 100 hours idea, almost like a meme. It spreads because it feels hopeful. It suggests that excellence is closer than we thought. Then there is the more famous 10,000-hour rule, which became widely known through Malcolm Gladwell's book about high achievement, where the idea is presented that deep mastery is built through massive repetition over time. Thoughtful, but the truth is more nuanced than both slogans. Time matters, of course, but time alone does not explain how people become experts. If it did, then everyone with years in a field would automatically be great at it. And we all know that is not true. There are people who spend years doing something and remain average, and there are others who progress faster, deeper, and more intelligently. So the real path to professionalism is not just about hours. It is about the stages a person passes through while learning. When someone begins developing in any field, whether it is business, flying, sports, communication, leadership, or anything else, they usually move through several distinct phases. Each phase has its own psychology, its own traps, and its own reasons why people either move forward or quietly give up. Understanding these phases is far more useful than obsessing over a magic number. The first stage is what could be called unconscious incompetence. This is where everyone starts. At this point, the person is excited, inspired, full of energy, and often deeply optimistic. They are driven by the image of what success will look like once they become skilled. They imagine the rewards, the recognition, the result, the confidence, the freedom, the money, or whatever else attracted them in the first place. What they do not yet see are the hidden layers of difficulty. They do not yet understand the depth of the craft, the complexity of the problems, or the long road ahead. In simple terms, this is the stage where a person does not yet know how much they do not know, and that is exactly why it can be dangerous. The main problem with this first stage is not that a person is inexperienced. Everybody starts there. The real danger is that people in this phase often make serious decisions too early, while still unaware of their own lack of competence. They may speak too confidently. They may overestimate their understanding. They may take risks they do not fully comprehend, and that can lead to terrible consequences. The moment a person becomes aware that they may be missing important knowledge, they instantly eliminate a huge percentage of avoidable mistakes. Just recognizing the limits of your understanding already makes you safer and smarter. Then comes the second stage, and this is where things get real. This stage can be described as conscious incompetence. This is the point where the beginner begins to see clearly. The illusion fades. The person starts to understand the size of the gap between where they are and where they want to be. They begin noticing their weak spots, their lack of skill, their missing knowledge, and the sheer amount of work still ahead. For many people, this phase is brutal. It is the place where excitement collides with reality. And for that reason, this is where a huge number of people quit. This stage is like the first serious section of a mountain climb. At the beginning, before the climb gets steep, everything feels romantic. You imagine the view from the top. You picture the photos, the achievement, the admiration, the sense of victory, but then the real ascent begins. Your legs feel heavy, your breathing changes, the summit suddenly looks far away, the trail becomes harder, and for the first time you realize how unprepared you actually are. That is what this second stage feels like. It is the valley where enthusiasm gets tested by truth. A lot of people fall apart here because discouragement sets in. They feel overwhelmed, their confidence drops, they start to doubt themselves. They feel burned out before they have even built momentum. They see how much they still need to learn and decide it is too much. That is why this phase is so important. It acts like a filter. It cuts away the people who are only in love with the fantasy. But interestingly, for some people, this phase has the opposite effect. Once they truly understand the difficulty, they become even more determined. They stop being casually interested and become serious. Their motivation changes flavor. It becomes sharper, harder, more stubborn. The challenge no longer scares them away. It provokes them. They decide that even if the road is longer than expected, they are still going to finish it. That is why this stage often polarizes people. It either crushes them or ignites them. Then comes the third phase, conscious competence. By this point, the person has already invested serious time, effort, and energy. They are no longer guessing what the path looks like. They have started to build real skill. They can feel progress. They have tasted small victories. They have already overcome earlier barriers, and that gives them a new kind of confidence. If we continue the mountain metaphor, this is the middle of the climb. You are not at the top yet, but you are far enough from the bottom that turning back becomes less attractive. You know how much work it took to get here. You also know there is still more ahead. At this point, many people keep going, but many others stop for a different reason than before. Earlier, people quit because the challenge felt too hard. Here they quit because what they have already gained feels good enough. They no longer feel like failures. They now have enough competence to function well, to earn, to operate, to live decently, and that becomes enough for them. They are no longer driven by the original goal with the same intensity. The gap between where they are and the absolute top no longer feels worth the cost, so they settle. And in many cases, that is not necessarily tragic. Not everyone needs to become world-class in everything. Sometimes reaching a solid, capable level is already a meaningful success. A person might decide that this point is their personal finish line. Think of someone trekking toward Everest Base Camp. They may consciously decide that reaching base camp is the goal, not the summit itself. That does not make the achievement small. It simply means they defined the target clearly. The same thing happens in careers and skills. Many people pass through the earlier struggle, reach a stage where they are competent enough to have a stable, respectable life, and choose to stop there. That is a completely different kind of exit than quitting in frustration. Then comes the fourth stage, unconscious competence. This is where the skill sinks so deeply into the person that it becomes automatic. The behavior no longer requires the same conscious effort. They act quickly, smoothly, and with very little mental strain. The craft becomes part of their nature. In many ways, this is what mastery feels like from the inside. A person can perform at a high level, almost instinctively, but this stage has a hidden danger too. The danger is autopilot. When someone becomes too experienced, they can start ignoring basic safeguards. They stop questioning themselves. They stop paying close attention to details that once demanded full concentration. Familiarity dulls alertness. The mind begins skipping steps because it believes it already knows everything. And this is where experience can betray you. A great example of this can be seen in aviation. There was a statistic that surprised me when I first studied it. Among helicopter pilots, one of the highest risk periods is the first 100 hours. That makes sense. At that stage, the pilot is still inexperienced, still too new, still standing at the boundary between beginner excitement and actual competence. They may be confident, but their skills are not yet stable enough. That combination creates danger. Then, as flight hours increase from the first 100 onward, accident rates usually begin to fall. The pilot gains skill, judgment, repetition, and confidence grounded in real ability. But then something interesting happens. After several hundred hours, accident risk can begin rising again. Why? Not because the pilots became less skilled, but because they became more comfortable. They started believing they had it all under control. That comfort leads to carelessness. A person begins to play a little, they bend routines, they relax standards, and that relaxed attitude creates new risk. Then later, after even more experience, the rates may fall again, only to rise once more at very high levels of expertise. Why would that happen among very experienced pilots? because by then the skill is so internalized that some of them stop consciously engaging with what they are doing. They rely too heavily on habit. They perform actions almost without thinking. And once again, elementary safety rules can start to fade into the background. This is the paradox of mastery. It is powerful because it becomes instinctive, but it is also dangerous when instinct begins replacing awareness. That is why it is so useful to ask yourself, before making an important decision or stepping into any difficult or risky activity, what stage of competence am I in right now? This is not just theory, it is practical. One of the smartest habits you can build into decision-making is to evaluate your actual level of competence before acting. Are you in the phase where you do not even see your blind spots yet? Are you in the phase where you have finally realized how much you still need to learn? Are you in the phase where you are capable but tempted to become complacent? Or are you so experienced that you may be operating too automatically? That question alone can save you from serious errors. It is also useful when evaluating other people. If you are listening to advice from someone, hiring a specialist, or trusting an expert, one of the first things you should consider is the level of competence behind their confidence. It is foolish to follow recommendations without first checking whether the person giving them actually understands the territory. Competence matters, and your life gets better when you become more skilled at recognizing where genuine competence exists and where it is only being performed. The important thing to understand is that every person moves through these stages. No one skips them. Some move faster, some move slower, but the sequence remains largely the same. That is why the number of hours by itself is not enough. Two people may spend the same amount of time doing something and end up at very different levels. Why? Because one person is growing through the stages, while the other is simply repeating routines that do not actually develop them. This is a huge problem in self-improvement and professional growth. Many people spend enormous amounts of time staying busy without becoming significantly better. They do familiar tasks over and over again, but those tasks do not challenge the next layer of ability. Their time accumulates, but their professionalism does not. The reason is simple: they have no real strategy for development. They are active, but not upgrading. They are occupied, but not evolving. That is why asking how many hours does it take is less useful than asking what stage am I in and what is required to move to the next one. Hours matter, yes. Repetition matters, yes. But without progression through these levels of awareness and competence, a person can waste years. So the answer is not that 100 hours magically makes you better than almost everyone, and it is not that 10,000 hours automatically turns you into a master. Time is only one ingredient. What really matters is how that time is used, whether it pushes you through the difficult transitions, whether it reveals your ignorance, sharpens your skill, deepens your judgment, and protects you from both beginner arrogance and expert carelessness. Professionalism is not built by the clock alone. It is built by what happens to you and within you as you move through the stages of growth.